series celebrating the diversity of Asian culture, connecting the diaspora through the arts, co-hosted by WCAPS Human Rights Working Group and Asia and the Pacific Working Group in recognition of AAPI Heritage Month. For more info on our working groups, check out the links that we'll be posting in the chat. As I said, this event is going to be recorded and posted up later, but please feel free to keep your cameras on because we'd love to see you and engage with you all. My name is Jackie Waight. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am one of the co-chairs of the WCAPS Human Rights Working Group and will be moderating today's conversation. In attendance today are my fellow Human Rights Working Group leadership team members who I'd like to highlight. Not all of them are here, but Fatima, Ranette, Blessing, Josefina, and Miriam, who is also one of our panelists, as well as the Asia and Pacific Working Group team, Amber Demery and Heather Wallach, who all have contributed in making this great event possible. We'd also like to recognize the WCAPS founder and executive director, well, former, I guess, executive director, Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins, and our new executive director, Shalonda Spencer, who is in attendance here today, and thank them for giving us this platform to elevate the voices of women of color in the fields of international peace, security, and conflict transformation. For anyone who's new to WCAPS or unfamiliar, we are a nonprofit organization that works to advance the leadership and professional development of women of color in the fields of international peace, security, and conflict transformation. For more information, please check out the website, wcaps.org. If you'd like to become a member of WCAPS, we're sending a link in the chat to our membership form. We'd love to have you join our network. Today's event is very informal, and I'll be inviting the audience throughout the conversation to also share their thoughts to the questions that I'll be posing to the panelists today. I'd like us all to feel welcome and safe to share, as well as connect with each other as we celebrate this month. Please also have your item ready to share, as I'll be asking about halfway through the conversation. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, let everyone know where you're calling in from, and share what brings you here today. With that said, I'm going to introduce our amazing panelists. Vannary Kong is a research fellow at the Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace, where she specializes her research in US-ASEAN relations, the role of the Mekong River and global trade, China's influence in the ASEAN region, and ongoing efforts with the ASEAN ICT strategies. She currently works at a defense contractor working to implement digital solutions within the US government to provide security and bridge the gap of the divide. Vannary also has 6 years of experience working with multilateral organizations such as the OECD, United Nations, ASEAN, World Bank, and IMF, promoting local to global initiatives, including supporting local SMEs to compete in the global markets and the role of technology in digital diplomacy. Dr. Miriam Sarwana is a human rights activist, a researcher, and a photographer. With a focus on human rights and social justice, she has conducted human rights trainings in the New York area, lobbied politicians for income equality initiatives with nonprofit organizations, and led research on women's rights and empowerment. She currently works to promote racial and social equity as a research and evaluation and analyst at BCT Partners. Welcome, Vannary and Dr. Miriam. Today, thank you both for joining us. So I'm gonna start us off with this first question to our panelists and to our audience. Please feel free to post in the chat. What are your most important identities? How do you identify, and what are your most important identities? Vannary or Miriam, please feel free to answer.
So I'll answer, I'll go ahead and take this one first. I think my most important identities that I always like to start with is that I'm a person, to humanize yourself first. So as you're, pursuing any goals or going into the world and dealing with our male counterparts, that they still recognize that we are that I'm a person as well, and I deserve to be treated humanely. And then I go in, starting with the pronouns, and then I will go into saying, my mom's a refugee from Cambodia, so I am of Khmer descent, and then I'm also African American, but I pursue them both equally. One does not negate the other. So that's also a part of me as far as my identity.
That was amazing. Yeah, so for me, I think that I do identify as, so kind of occupationally, it's kind of as a human rights activist and like a feminist. But in terms of more racial identities, I believe I identify as Asian, Pakistani, and Muslim. And so kind of occupying an intersection of those three.
Thank you both for sharing. Yeah, I really love, Vannary, that you shared that you identify as human first. That kind of blew my mind. And I think that's really important to remember, because I feel like just in the world today, it feels like it can be very dehumanizing a lot of the times, and we forget that we are human beings. And the way that our society kind of is structured, it can feel a lot of the times that we're treated as kind of robotic. So I really appreciate that. And this question is also to kind of bring light that we all hold multiple identities, not just a racial identity, not just a gender identity. We hold multiple identities, and some of them are invisible. I don't know if anyone in the audience also wants to share their identities and which of them feels important to them.
Sure, I'll share. Hopefully get the audience participation going. For me, also, Vannary, I do love that you said that human first. Like, I was like, yeah, that's beautiful, especially now with the things, things going on in the world. That's super important. For me, I guess my most important identities would be, I'm Black American, I'm a woman. And this one is not nearly as serious, I suppose, but I'm a nerd, and I own it, and I love it.
I love that. I'll share mine too. Personally, it's hard for me to pick any one that's like most important to me. It feels weird having to say one is more important than the other, because they all make up who I am, and they all deserve equal attention from me. So I think the most important is the human identity, and then all of my racial identity and everything kind of comes right after that. So I consider myself Asian American. I'm biracial. I am half white, half Vietnamese. My mom is a Vietnamese immigrant. I identify as LGBTQ+. I am a woman of color. That was something that was really hard for me to even say. I didn't consider myself a woman of color until last year, which I think maybe we'll touch on later in this conversation, because I didn't consider myself as an Asian American, as a woman of color. But that is my experience. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else wants to share. I'll pause to leave some space for anyone who wants to come off mute.
Yeah, I will share a little bit. I think I can say I'm an Asian American now. I am a new citizen to this country. I was born in Japan, and I grew up in Japan. And I came to this country after I grew up. So it was a little bit difficult for me to be hyphenated American, but after what's going on in this country for the past couple of years, I really decided to be a citizen, to contribute to this country's democracy. So I would say I'm a proud Asian American and maybe Japanese American, but most importantly, as many of you said, I'm a human who is very passionate about peace and security, particularly nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. So it really comes down like what I value and what I do, so yeah, so I'm still feeling, at this stage of life, I'm still trying to figure out what is my identity, but I really think identity, maybe in my view, can be defined based on your value, how you act, how cherish other people, how cherish my identity. So perhaps this is my lifelong soul search, but I'm so comfortable to be in this kind of a community, like a very safe space, and who are really open to any ideas, any differences. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Masako. I resonate a lot with what you said. I think it does, our values and what we care about a lot informs our identity a lot. And I shared this at another panel I did, something that a friend shared with me that she learned from her Black female karate teacher is that if you know who you are, no one can take that away from you. So if you have a firm, grasp of who you are, who you believe you are, when it comes to your identity or your personality or your characteristics, all of that, it doesn't matter what other people say or what they think, because you already have that firm belief in you and what you stand for. And I think, our identities are something that is always changing along with our values. I feel like our values kind of grow over time, and they're definitely never the same forever. And I think that's really a natural thing for us as human beings. We're never stagnant. We're never the same throughout our entire lives. So yeah, I think that's really important. I think, thank you so much, Masako, for sharing. Did anyone else want to share? Yes, please feel free to be on camera if you're comfortable. We'd love to see you all. But if no one else wants to add on to that, I'm going to move on to the next question to our panelists, Miriam and Vannary, if either of you want to pop in first. How has your Asian and or Asian American identity evolved?
I can start with this one. So for me, I think, just growing up, I feel like your identity established itself at some point and then kind of evolves over time. So for me, my Asian/Asian American identity has definitely developed and become more complex over time. For me, having spent a part of my childhood and schooling in Pakistan, I knew I was kind of geographically located in Asia, the continent. So at this point, Karachi, Pakistan, Asia was my location, not my identity. But then coming back to the United States, I felt a connection with Asian kids of the diaspora, but also everyone who had come to the United States as kind of these first generation kids, and with our unique lunches and having lunches that no other student really understood, and having like this strict parenting that kids didn't really understand either as much. And so at that point, I started to have like more developed idea of I was different from, I wasn't just American. There was like a hyphen there, and it was connected to really everyone else I was encountering. So Asian American was a hyphen that I developed then at that point, and then Pakistani American. And then I felt like the Muslim identity didn't develop really until, I guess, surprisingly, like September 11th, where you now were being treated differently because of being Muslim. And at that point, my Muslim identity just like intensified, where I was just like, oh, like here is another hyphen that indicates that I'm different from being just American. And so I felt then a strong connection with Muslims in America, regardless of whether or not they were Asian at that point too. And so I think that for me, there was a lot of, it was just that my identity has become more and more complex over time. And then, as we kind of do more human rights work and we pay attention to social justice movements and like what's going on to different people, and I think our identity does expand then even more to encompass, as you guys have all been saying, like the human identity, because now we aren't just representing like this small in-group that we felt connected to, throughout our lives. So in that case, I think it's just been expanding and becoming more complex over time. And so I think that there are these cultural bits and pieces of our identities that belong to different intersections we end up occupying, or different people that we end up feeling any sort of connection with. So in summary, it's just become really complex and expanded a lot, and there's a lot of dissonance there, but it's really cool because it makes the identity a lot more fluid as well.
I too also like to agree with Miriam on my identity piece. I think with what you shared, Miriam, I definitely experienced a lot of like the lunchroom situation as well. But I feel like for me personally, as we progress forward through life, your identity is always changing. And I know for me in particular too, like I was raised in Indianapolis, so a lot of times people didn't know what Cambodia was or where it was. So I know in certain parts of the US, it's kind of like they want to place on certain groups that this monolith type of identity that some of us don't belong to. And my mom definitely doesn't look East Asian at all. She definitely looks 100% Cambodian to a T. So I know when I was growing up, I was definitely being questioned, do I follow the one drop rule that the US has constantly perpetrated on a lot of the mixed like African American and if they have another side as well, or do I really take a hold of my Cambodian heritage? And I think the other piece of it as well is that even just within the Asian community, you know, colorism is still something that we're honestly dealing with as well. So for me, I had to really take account into what does it mean to be Cambodian. So I know growing up, what I used to do is I honestly used to research the history myself because we weren't taught that in schools. And so sometimes when I was growing up in elementary school, it's like they would only teach us about like a handful of Asian countries. And I just even remember being in college, I had a professor literally say that Cambodia doesn't matter, we're just another refugee demographic. So even dealing with like the interracism within the Asian community, that's something that I had to learn how to not let those experiences affect how I identify myself if I wanted to pursue calling myself an Asian and an African American woman. And I think that now being able to move out from the Midwest to the East Coast and being in spaces where if I'm focusing on Asian policy, not letting our non-melanated colleagues that are male try to define what my identity should be just because they might pursue me a certain way. But yeah, that's kind of how my identity evolved. And then also just connecting with other like-minded people like everyone else here on this call. And you know, my best friend, she's Jamaican, but she has Chinese ancestry. So it's always interesting hearing what it means to be even in the Caribbean and having Asian heritage and having this sense of you look like you may belong, but because of, you know, the indentured servitude of coolies, you know, what it means to be Asian looks different for everyone else. So I also had to come in terms of that, especially when you're traveling outside of the US, because then the identities shift as well.
Thank you, Vannary and Miriam for sharing. I really do think that the more that our worlds expand, the more our identities expand, which makes sense because, you know, it evolves over our lifetime. And yeah, that's definitely something I've experienced. For me personally, how my identity has evolved. It's also been a complex one because it's still something that I'm still exploring myself. So I feel that I'm still also learning what identities resonate with me. With my Asian identity specifically, that's something that was really hard for me growing up because I also experienced that, like, the racism within the Asian community as well, because at least with my mom's side of the family, I was never Asian enough. You know, especially being half white, they always call me white or too white. I look white, I don't look Asian, I don't speak the language. I only speak English. I never learned my mom's language. And I just never felt accepted anywhere. And also something that I haven't really reflected upon a lot, but something I'm starting to think about is how much or how little Vietnamese people I see out in the world, whether it be like in media or learning about in school and stuff like that. I feel very distant from my Vietnamese culture and my Vietnamese identity. So that's my experience with my Asian identity. I don't know if anyone else wants to come off mute and share. Whether you're Asian or not, you can answer this question from your own experience and your own identity. We'd love to hear.
I can go again.
Yeah, please.
Actually, Jackie, what you just said was what really made me think about that evolving because of how you said like your Asian side of your family would sometimes say you're too white. But it's so funny how I guess that's kind of like a term that people use often for people of color or people of different descent. Like I got that so much when I was younger, just because my interests were different. Like I liked anime or I liked rock music or whatever, right? Or you call it, you know, or being from Southern United States, being in taking AP classes is like, oh, you're an Oreo because you're smart. And it's like, how dare you? You know? So, and for me, like that really evolved a lot when I started going to college and I went to an HBCU, Howard University, and seeing like the broad spectrum of what Black around the world was, because it was really international, how many people went to Howard. I was like, okay, I understand now. Like this is me. Like the stuff from before, those were other people's identities they're trying to put on me, like Vannary and Miriam both said. So being able to like create your own and separate it and realize this is who I am, this is who you are. Like I growing up is great, you know.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, really. Thank you, Amber, for sharing. Something that I've talked about with some of my other Asian American friends is that it's kind of confusing to me that the racism within at least like the Asian community, where if I'm like not Asian enough or I'm like too white for them, it just doesn't make sense to me that they do that. But a lot of them try really hard to be as close to whiteness as possible, to like be assimilated and like fit in. Not everyone, of course, but it just seems something that's apparent to me. So I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's. That's so interesting that you mentioned that, Jackie. Because I feel like there's this thing where everyone's has this idea of what actions betray your identities and what actions don't. And every single person, even if it's every Asian American or even let's go specific, like Vietnamese American, has a different idea of how you can betray your identity and how you're actually going to represent it well. Like even in the Pakistani community, for example, I've noticed that, you know, as I was growing up, I always felt like I didn't fit in very well because I was just like, I'm too Americanized for them. Like I don't want to. I used to wear a hijab, like a headscarf, for a while, and then when I took it off, I was like, oh God, you know, everyone's gonna view me in a certain way, and I'm not gonna be accepted because I was already on the trajectory of not being accepted because of the things that I wanted to do and things. So, but it was really interesting because you meet certain people who think you're betraying the identity, and certain people who think that you're okay because they're also betraying the identity in the same way. So it's a weird thing where maybe it's like being in the United States or maybe being in a setting where you're not surrounded by people of the same exact, let's say, racial identity as you, that sometimes people feel the need to really define what it means to be part of your in-group and to kind of protect themselves from anything that might threaten it too.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Miriam. I really agree. And I think it kind of goes back to the whole, if you know who you are, no one can take that from you type thing. And that's something that I've struggled with my entire life. I've always let other people tell me who I am rather than me figuring that out for myself and not letting other people tell me who I am. But that's something that I'm very much having a firmer grasp on these days. I don't know if anyone else wanted to share. I wanted to leave some space for anyone else.
I can go. So I was born in Russia and I moved to America when I was very young, and I was raised in a Russian household. And so I've always kind of had something like Miriam said, like we would eat our own food at lunch and stuff, and people would look at it and think, oh, you're weird, why are you eating that? And I feel like growing up, I sometimes would distance myself from like the Russian identity. Sometimes I'd be more into it. And it would just always go back and forth. And like when I'm in Russia, I don't feel like I fit in at all. And then I don't like 100% fit in the American culture either. And I think over time I've kind of learned, like, I feel like I'm right in the middle of like a true Russian American. Although like I don't always like telling people that I'm from Russia because I don't want to be associated with the politics of that nation. And I think that, I don't know if other people also worry about that too, but yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Is your name pronounced Anastasia?
Well, I mean, I go by Anastasia.
Anastasia? Okay, thank you for letting me know. But thank you for sharing. I think something that I've also been learning is that you just can't please everybody, and I'm not gonna try, especially when it comes to identity, because it's my identity, not yours. So stop telling me who to be. Something that I get really tired of, and I'm sure many of you might resonate with that. But yeah, thank you all in the chat. Did anyone else want to share? I think I saw Josefina, your mic come up.
Yeah, I'll share quickly. Thank you everyone so much for sharing your experiences. Jackie, your point about growing up and not fitting in with your cousins really resonated with me. My dad is white, my mom is Mexican. So visiting either cousin group growing up, I didn't really fit in with anybody. Nobody looked like me or my sisters, but I had siblings, and so we just kind of relied on that sisterhood together. And then when I went off to elementary school, I was really lucky to find a friend in another person that didn't really look like anybody around her. My best friend growing up, her family was from Bangladesh, and when she came to our school, people would make fun of the way her lunch smelled, the way that she looked, her parents looked. And so like in kindergarten, we'd run around beating the bullies with our lunch boxes, and we just kind of stuck with that sisterhood together through high school and through college, and kind of just embracing that ostracism together really led me to pursue spaces and be comfortable in spaces where I was with people who looked differently, sounded differently, dressed differently than me. And it led me in college to doing things like taking a summer program at Howard University and just embracing that differentness. And so when talking about identity, it's difficult because I kind of embrace just adapting to whatever group I'm in while also maintaining my own values and the things that my parents embedded in me just as human beings, not necessarily, even though their cultures definitely have influenced me. I mean, everybody's culture, I allow that to influence me. And so I was really grateful when I found WCAPS because I love this community of just women of color together, learning from each other. And that sisterhood has just always been an important part of my life. And I'm so grateful that the professional world is creating these programs and these networks that are more open and inclusive of all groups.
Thank you so much for sharing, Josefina. I definitely agree with all of that and resonate with it. I think, at least within the US, I think that the way that society is, for some reason, it does not like different. And I think anyone that fits outside of this box that the US like has this idea of how people should be, it serves as a threat to the structures that it has right now. So especially us being women of color who are all here, we serve as a threat to the box, the white, male, straight, and all the other identities that they see as like, this is how everyone should be. And we serve as a threat to that. So let's continue to be different and question the ways that America is. All right, so moving on to the next question. How has being a part of the diaspora affected your experience and how you view yourself? I know this is pretty related to what we kind of already discussed, but maybe you can touch on how it's affected your view of yourself. Don't all speak at once.
So I guess I could start with this one. I think that, I guess being a part of the diaspora creates like this situation where you're immediately uncomfortable, I think. So it's like you begin your life, or at some point in your life, you are just thrown into a situation where you most of the time don't belong because there aren't too many people like you. So I think that it definitely like caused some confusion as I was growing up, and then kind of, a little bit of fear, attached to certain identities that I didn't want to represent. For example, after 9/11, I didn't want to be obviously Muslim, and I wanted to like hide that as much as possible. Or if I brought that up, I wanted to kind of, as Anastasia mentioned, I wanted to be like, all right, I'm Muslim, but just so you all know, I'm like cool, like it's fine. And so it was kind of, it was definitely, and kind of, certain parts of it just kind of, when you hear certain jokes and things, I didn't know how to react. So I was just confused a lot, because I was like, I don't know if I should be laughing at jokes at my expense, and I should be like, haha, yes, when, who was it? Someone was killed who was a terrorist, and I had people who were, a lot of people came up to me, this was in college, I believe, a lot of people came up to me and said, well, hope you're okay after your uncle died. And I just didn't know if I was supposed to like laugh at this, or to be, someone who's okay with having this as part of my, like, okay with the joke. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So I think I was just very confused a lot. And there was a lot of fear, associated with, I think the biggest fear related identity I have is like as a Muslim person. And so, just being afraid for seeing how people would react to us, and just kind of seeing how people would like pull their kids away from us. Like we were in the grocery store and stuff, like me and my family, and my mom is just like this mini sized human. And I'd just be like, I hope that she's going to be okay, like walking around by herself. So it was a lot of, it led to some growing up really quickly, in that I was like, I have to somehow be okay with the fact that this is who I am, and this is who I'm going to be, and that my mom's always going to wear a headscarf, and she's always going to be something. If a Muslim does something crazy in some part of the world, something bad could potentially happen to my mother. So I think that kind of thing made me very confused and very scared. But as I've been, so this is a lot for me to think about. But so that it was hard for me to internalize that. So I kind of, even religiously and spiritually, had a really hard time, and just tried to reject everything related to being Muslim, for example, because I was like, I have to get rid of this identity somehow. But as I grew older, and as kind of Vannary mentioned as well, so I moved to parts of the place where you would see representation of yourself, and you would see that, sorry about the train. So you would see that people around you were okay with who you were. And I found, friends who did not say, oh, wow, you're like so blank for a blank. Like you're so nice for a Muslim, or like you're so, not intense about schoolwork for a Pakistani person. And so, so like different things like that. I found little pockets where I felt kind of safe. And so that for me was really helpful, in that now I guess I'm at this point where I'm kind of like, okay, if I can create this safety within the friendships that I have within the groups I'm part of, for example, WCAPS, then you can actually allow for all the kind of the dissonance and the kind of complexities that come with having so many different identities, to actually make you more creative. For example, in like solving problems, for example, in relating to people. It's so much easier to understand the suffering of others when you feel like your identity is just everything and everywhere. So I think that it allows for that kind of fluidity now. And now I feel okay with the fact that my identity is kind of unstable and complex, and it's constantly evolving, and it's sometimes really abstract. And that embracing the complexity of what it means to be like Asian or Muslim or a woman, or every one of the identities we occupy, actually makes it so that I have a much more inclusive personal identity and a much more inclusive kind of view of the world. So it's come full circle in a nice way. But a lot of it, I think, with the diaspora was just confusion, and I don't know how to deal with this. And somehow nobody else around me did either, even if we were from the same kind of culture at that time or same position. So that's been a good process to come here today.
Thank you so much, Miriam, for sharing and for your vulnerability. I thank you so much. Vannary, I think you wanted to.
Yes, I definitely wanted to touch on this. I think for being a part of the diaspora, something that I had to personally learn how to deal with was the social hierarchy and learning how to deal with intergenerational trauma, especially when it hasn't really been addressed through a mental health perspective. I think, like I said, when we talk about shifting identities and going overseas, I remember being at a conference and being one of like the only 2 U.S. representatives there, and someone saying, and it actually was in Japan, and like I said, this was just my personal experience, but I remember one of the organizing members literally looked at me and said, "Are you Asian or something?" And then once I proceeded to explain that I was Cambodian, having to deal with the, "Oh, you must be smart for a jungle agent," kind of like what Miriam talked about as well, and hearing this dynamic between the fancy Asians and the jungle Asians and the colorism and the negative stereotypes as well. And I think the interesting part that we all play as young or mid-level professionals is being able to change the cultural norm of what it means to be whatever identity we have. We're literally smashing stereotypes in the glass ceilings, one action at a time, whether it's just learning how to pause and not respond to where you want to respond, and having to teach someone in a language that they can understand, whether it's showing them that you can do the work to the best of your ability, no matter if it's someone at a conference or a boss that thinks you're incapable due to statistics. And I think the other interesting thing that plays as well, just even thinking about it from an international context, is for a lot of French Cambodians, they actually look down on us because we were the lower economic class of the Cambodian diaspora. So a lot of times when they talk to me in Khmer, they'll actually use a lot of derogatory words that are equivalent to the N-word because of my melanated color. And when they see a lot of our accolades that we have here in the US, even though statistically a lot of Cambodians are prone to gang violence and poverty because of the migration issues, that's been something that's been very interesting to deal with as well, being one of the only few melanated Cambodians that get the opportunity to go to college, unless you have Chinese ancestry. So my mom actually had a hard time trying to learn what it means to be Cambodian to her, because she chose to not interact because of the colorism and because of the social kind of like the social order within our community. So that's been interesting to deal with. And then as far as generational trauma, you know, having to talk to your grandfather who's been tortured by a lot of the communists and saying what PTSD is, because a lot of our language doesn't have these terminologies. And we're now addressing it because it's now coming up, especially during, you know, Stop Asian Hate, and explaining why they need to be chauffeured and making sure that they're safe. So I think that's another thing as well. And then, sorry, the last point, and when it comes to intergenerational trauma, is kind of reaching out to people in your community saying, I'm not here to compete with you, I'm here to help you progress forward. Why do we need to feel to put each other down when we can all work together, you know, to make a common goal? And Jackie, what you said earlier, I also resonated as well, because a lot of my cousins are also Chinese Cambodian, and I used to get put down a lot for being the only one that was half Black, but it's really interesting because I was the only one that went to higher education and got a professional career, whereas my cousins aren't really doing as much. So now there is this rift because on paper they should be the more successful ones, but because of their privilege, they want to stay stacked where they're at, and whereas I'm actually the one having to help out the family and take over those matriarchal duties. So that's kind of where the diaspora kind of led me to believe as far as my identity.
Thank you so much, Vannary, for sharing. I thank you for bringing up intergenerational trauma as well. I think mental health plays a huge part in all of this. But I want to give Gabby a chance to share. I saw you post it in the chat. I don't know if you want to come off mute and share with us if you feel comfortable.
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Gabby. I'll get on camera too. I just shared in the chat a little bit about what being a part of the diaspora means to me. And I think for me, it really gives me the opportunity to view Senegal. So I guess a little bit of background, right? My father's an immigrant from Senegal, and my mother is a mix of a lot of things, but she's a Black woman from Ohio, basically. And being a part of, when I'm thinking about Senegal, at least, being a part of that diaspora community, it gives me the opportunity to kind of view and interact with my culture in a different way. So it allows me to view that part of my culture from a different vantage point. And I don't think this is always true because, you know, being from the diaspora, you could literally be anywhere in the world, you know, other than that particular community. So you might not be in the United States, right? But I think being in the United States and being afforded some of the privileges that I've been able to take advantage of, it kind of allows me to come up with different creative ways to interact with my Senegalese community and heritage. And it's also like, when I talk about the privileges that I've been able to take advantage of, higher education is obviously one of them. Being able to work a professional, you know, 9-to-5 job is one of them. I work in international development, so I get to, you know, they send me places here and there, and I think that's another kind of privilege because, you know, they could send me to Senegal one of these days, and that would be another way that I could reconnect with that side. But anyway, yeah, being a part of the diaspora and not like having grown up in Senegal and maybe facing a lot of the challenges that women face there. It's given me like the opportunity to leverage my education, my finances in order to interact with that community. So that was something that I kind of thought of. And then I kind of closed it off by saying, you know, that I'm actually very grateful to have another place to look at as a home or a part of my I guess being. That was it.
Thank you so much, Gabby, for sharing. I think something that I wanted to also bring up, since Vannary kind of brought up intergenerational trauma and all of that. So I don't know, my perspective of myself has kind of changed throughout time. Something that I've been thinking about as of recently in relation to like my Asian American identity, as well as like mental health stuff, because I also struggle a lot with mental health. Shout out to anyone else who's also dealing with it. Is that I view like me being like half white, half Vietnamese, and also like addressing my mental health issues, is that my existence is like a literal like physical manifestation of like a break in this like cycle of this intergenerational trauma of kind of like this bridge between these two different I guess identities, being white and being Vietnamese. Like my existence is literally a bridge and also a break in the cycle of this mental health, because something that Vannary you brought up is that my parents definitely do not understand like mental health stuff. Like both my white dad and my Vietnamese mother, they don't address that at all. And that's something that they have carried their entire lives. And I'm pretty sure they're going to continue to carry for the rest of their lives. And I just view my existence as something that I can be the break in that cycle, so that future generations that come after me, whoever it is I interact with, whether it be if I have my own kids one day, or if I meet other people in WCAPS, or like make other friends, or meet other colleagues, like I hope to plant seeds in other people so that they don't have to continue to carry the heavy things that they continue to carry. Even if it's like the smallest bit of difference in their life, I hope that they carry it with them and that it blossoms into something at some point. But I'm gonna quickly move on. I know that we are getting close to time, so if anyone needs to drop off at any point, please feel free to do so. We acknowledge that we all have lives. But moving on, I want to give us all some time to be able to share a little piece of South or Southeast Asian art. If anyone came prepared with something to share, so anyone feel free to hop off mute and show us.
I can jump in. And this is like, you guys are gonna be like, Gabby, you're ridiculous. But my mother gave me this commemorative edition of Time magazine when I went to go visit her last week. And since we're talking about the diaspora and, you know, mixed heritage and all of that kind of stuff, I wanted to share this special edition of Time magazine with Kamala Harris on the front. So that's my artistic read. I haven't gone through it, but the entire thing from the front cover to the back cover, it's all about her and her life. So I look forward to digging through this. Anyway, that's my little piece.
I'll jump in because first of all, I want that and I'm gonna go find it and buy it. Second of all, I guess it's not really art, it's more of an artist. Her name is Taz Ahmed. She is, let me see if I can find out where she's from. Well, she's South Asian and also Muslim, and I first found out about her from a podcast called Good Muslim, Bad Muslim. It was her, Taz Ahmed, and her friend Zara Nurbash, and who is Iranian American. But both of them basically are just comedians, but they're also activists. And Taz is wonderful and hilarious and very awesome. She's written books, she's written articles. Also, she's a comedian and wonderful. So if you're just looking for something, another South Asian person to follow or artist to pay attention to, Taz Ahmed.
Can you drop like their socials or like something in the chat? Yay, thanks, Amber. Did anyone else want to share something?
I'll share. I actually have two, but I'll share the first one from my phone. So there's this artist named Lisa Mom, and this is her painting about our traditional apsara. It comes from, well, our religion comes from Hinduism, but Theravada and Buddhism is what we practice in Cambodia. And what I like about it is that she's basically trying to revitalize our culture because so much got lost in the genocide. And with the Belt and Road Initiative and the rise of skin bleaching products, you see a lot of our media representation being very non-color. So she's trying to bring that beautiful melanin back into our representation, which I think is great. And then the second one is my grandma actually got this for me, but it's it's still the same thing, but it's the traditional apsara. It's one of the only few dances that got saved. So it's one of our most sacred dances. So whenever I get sad, I just kind of look at it for inspiration because it represents beauty and strength, and it's kind of like our version of like women's feminism in Cambodia.
I think I saw Tazia. Did you come off?
Yeah. Hi. Hi everyone. I'm Tasha. I know it's not pronounced like it looks. I wanted to share something that I discovered earlier this morning, actually by chance, but it's really cool. So this is Queer Indonesia Archive, and it's a work by activists in Indonesia who are working to find and digitize the LGBTQ zines that were prominent in like the 1990s in Indonesia, which are kind of out of circulation now that, you know, the government's gotten a lot more restrictive towards queer identities. But I think that the social media is in Bahasa, but you can translate using Google. It's really cool to look at.
Thank you for correcting me, Taja, and thank you for sharing.
I just wanted to introduce one new organization called Engage Asia. This organization was established by one of my good friends, I think a few years ago. So I think there is some emphasis on Japan or East Asia, but this organization is trying to establish good bridge between Asian countries and the US. So I just wanted to introduce this.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share?
I just wanted to add really quickly, I clicked on the link for the Engage Asia website. When I scrolled down, I saw a very familiar cast iron tea kettle. And I just got one of those. So I just moved into a new place and like I have been making tea like crazy. And I got one of those cast iron. I should have brought that over, but because it's from Japan. But anyway, very cool.
Very cool. Oh, I can share an artist. I wonder if I can share her link. So basically, one artist I think is very inspiring is, because I always think the idea of just kind of being confused and having all this dissonance and just having a lot of complexities and identities is always so super interesting. And there's this artist named Shazia Sikander, and she basically grew up in Pakistan. So she has a lot of these, she grew up with a lot of like colonial ideas of like how you're supposed to create art. She went to an English speaking school and stuff, because that's a lot of what's, what is remaining after the British left. And so her art basically tries to, I wonder if I can share my screen, because I just like put some of her art pieces on a little slide. Is it possible? Oh yeah. So she kind of, okay, there. Yeah, so she basically, can you all see my screen actually?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so she actually identifies as South Asian, American, feminist, and Muslim, just in terms of her most important identities. And she kind of tries to dispute, so she tries to take colonial ideas of how you're supposed to do art and then dispute them and kind of imbue her own cultural narrative in there. And she takes things from, the different artistic styles like Impressionism, Expressionism, and she manipulates that to create these like collage-like images as well. And so she kind of tries to contest the idea of what power is supposed to be, tries to understand power the way that we understand in Western civilization, and kind of tries to turn it on its head. So I thought that was really cool, and I always love that in an artist. So I'll post the link for her website here.
Thank you, Miriam, for sharing. Did anyone else want to share before we move on? Okay, I posted mine in the chat, but it's a graphic novel that I read recently called The Magic Fish. Also, I'll show you really quickly. I love it, super good, highly recommend. I put the link so you can read the kind of what it's about, but yeah. I know we're getting really close to time here, and I hope everyone is okay if we go over time a little bit, but if you have to hop off, please feel free to do so. But also panelists, are you okay with time? Okay, awesome. We have a few more questions here. So I'm gonna move on to the next one. Who is an artist or cultural figure that made you realize your voice mattered as an Asian/Asian American?
I can tell you, I can start. So there's actually this Japanese filmmaker and artist, and I love him. So he's part of this studio of artists called Studio Ghibli, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but his name is Hayao Miyazaki, and he has the most stunning like films I've ever seen. And I always felt like the way that he created films, it was like calming, but then also like really representing the kind of things that, for example, Japan during World War II, and kind of these historical moments in a way that I felt like I didn't see in any other, American or film that I had encountered while being here in America. So that for me kind of made me realize that when you imbue your own identity into your work and you allow for that to filter through instead of, I spent a lot of my childhood trying to assimilate, but then instead of trying to assimilate and trying to fit into whatever mold you're given, then it actually results in what I think is something even more, complex and interesting and beautiful. And so he's kind of my inspiration. And I just like have pictures of different movies that he's done and like little screenshots and stuff, because I think he's just incredible. Yeah, so Grave of the Fireflies. Oh my God. I have like I don't know if you could see it, but like a little, like a screenshot of the movie that I just printed out, because it's just beautiful, incredible. But yeah, he's amazing.
I grew up on Hayao Miyazaki. I love him so much. My favorite movie of all time is Spirited Away. Grew up on the movie. I rewatched it recently, and the storytelling. Hayao Miyazaki is one of the most talented human beings ever. Love him so much. Thank you for showing him. Oh,
and if you see how he makes things, like have you seen his making ofs? He has a couple of making of movies. And he's just so whimsical, and he draws everything himself because he wants it to be perfect and he wants it to represent how it looks like a caterpillar moving in real life and everything. I love it when people are so happy about what they're doing too.
Highly recommend people go to the Studio Ghibli Museum in Japan if you ever get a chance.
That is one of the places I am literally planning on going to when I do visit Japan, because it is going to happen. I'm going to Japan and I'm going to the Studio Ghibli Museum for sure. I grew up on his movies. Thank you for mentioning him. I could go on forever on him, but did anyone else want to share?
I also just want to share as well. I think when it came to my identity, a pivotal person was also Ariana Miyamoto. She was the first Black Miss Japan Universe in 2015, and I think at the time that she won the pageant, it was the time I actually felt seen, because she got to there was a lot of controversy on coexisting with her identities. And at the time when when she won Miss Nagasaki, there was so many articles speaking out and what to consider part of the Asia diaspora. So that was one. And I think the second one too, when I felt seen as far as within my community, there is a book called First They Killed My Father, which later on Angelina Jolie made a movie on, and it got on Netflix, where it showed our visibility when it came to the genocide. But I know now in social media there's starting to be more visibility on, we're so much more besides that, but it's just, we're also just trying to reinvent myself. But those were two figures in particular. The book is by Long too, by the way.
Thank you, Vannary. I'll also share two really quick. Not really a real person. I mean, I will agree with Hayao Miyazaki, one of the most prominent, I think, people in my life who has influenced me through his amazing storytelling, for sure. Spirited Away made such a huge difference in my life. But I will mention a different series. I grew up on anime. I love anime. Like, I am an anime nerd for sure, 1000%. But one of the most impactful series for me, I grew up on Naruto. And granted, Masashi Kishimoto is not the greatest writer when it comes to female characters, but Naruto himself made a huge impact on my life, because I grew up feeling very alone and lost, and that my voice didn't matter. And he didn't make me feel more empowered as like an Asian American, but more empowered as like a human and a person overall. Because Naruto is like, he is an orphan, and he literally, the entire village like does not like him. They cast him aside. He nobody cares about him, and they all pretty much like, he's just on his own his entire life, and he had to be the one to motivate himself all the time and tell him and push himself to achieve the dreams that he wanted, and everything like that. I actually even drew a photo of him that I have here. I love him so much, but yeah, I grew up on him. Huge impact in my life. And overall, anime is amazing. But yeah, anyone else want to answer the question as well?
Not Asian, but Growing up, I used to watch figure skating I think it came on every Sunday or Saturday or something with my grandma. And so obviously Michelle Kwan was killing it, and like used to watch her every day. And I like to think that I'm still kind of growing up in a sense. And Naomi Osaka is killing it, by the way. And I think a lot of young people are going to say, you know, she was a great influence on their lives, you know, years and years from now. And I saw an ad for those of you in DC, or, you know, who may know, maybe Sweet Green is everywhere. You guys know about Sweet Green salad place? She has a bowl there now. So you heard it here first.
Thanks for sharing, Gabby. That's so cool. I'm going to move on to the next question, but please feel free to also put your answers in the chat as well if you don't want to come off mute. Is there a style or art form that when you practice it, experience it, listen to it, etc., it makes you feel more connected to your heritage or your culture?
I can start off with this, but in April, it's actually a lot of Asian countries celebrate their New Year's, but I'm just gonna talk about Cambodia in particular. But we always have like this big festival and this big parade, especially in Long Beach, and so we all practice the Rongbong dance, which is something that everyone can do, but that's something in particular. And then in October, another art form that I also practice is kind of like our chanting for Pachun Bin, when we honor our ancestors and like give the blessing. So just still trying to, you know, pass down those traditions as well.
Yeah, definitely for Vietnamese people, we celebrate Lunar New Year every year. So that is something for me that I feel very connected to my culture. And wearing an ao dai, which is like the traditional Vietnamese dress, that makes me feel really connected to something that I did growing up. And I stopped for a period of time because I just didn't feel very connected to my Vietnamese side. But something that I have been wanting to do more is feel more connected. So things like that, and like being able to go to like Lunar New Year festivals and like seeing people doing the lion dance. That's one of my favorite things ever. And when people are handing out the red envelopes, but it's not about the money, it's more about like the practice and like everything. But yeah, things like that for me. And food, definitely.
Yeah, I was gonna say for me, food as well. Like I think that the cooking, for some reason, it makes me feel just so connected when I'm able to cook something that my mom's been cooking, or even I've noticed that, you know, when you try something that someone else from, let's say, another culture has cooked for you too, just like sharing in the practice of eating food together and the cooking together is just, I feel like it connects you to other heritage really easily as well, because it just activates so many senses at that point.
I can jump in, Jack, if you don't mind. For me, for this question, I want to throw out Zydeco, which I'm not sure if many people have ever heard of Zydeco music. Sorry, there's like somebody's hammering in my complex. But Zydeco is it's kind of a old style Louisiana type of music. It mixes in like French, Creole, African-American, R&B, like they use the washboard sometimes like a type of instrument, but it's like really fast paced and high tempo. And it's a type of music that's, I guess, more indigenous to like Louisiana and of course, Native American influences, of course. But it's not a type of music that you hear much outside of Louisiana. So it's just something whenever I hear it, it brings me back. Even like seeing the word somewhere, I'm just like, oh wow, someone else is from home, like someone else understands.
Did anyone else want to share? Thank you, Amber, for jumping in too. Doesn't have to be Asian culture, whichever culture you come from. No pressure. We'll move on. But feel free to share in the chat if you'd like. So this is the last question that we have for today. Is there somewhere you feel you have to hide your identity and or identities? For me personally, I'll share first since no one else wants to hop in. Something that I've realized is that when I go into very white spaces, it makes me extremely uncomfortable. And I don't know if that's going to change, but that's where I feel extremely uncomfortable. And if I'm ever in that situation, I'm always like trying to find anyone else that's like not white or anything. Like I'm like seeking out where I can like basically like seek refuge or like safety from someone. That's my experience. And I try to be around like people that I feel safe with, people that I know accept my identities, both visible and invisible identities, and are at least they seem like open-minded, and you know, just willing to let me exist as I am without me having to think I have to be someone that I'm not.
Yeah, I'll also answer to this too, Jackie. I feel like when I have to interview for any type of position or just like a fellowship, so I'll actually straighten my hair. So just to kind of put on this or try to put on this racial ambiguity and not try to talk about like my identity, so we can just focus on like the skill sets within like a workspace type thing. Because I feel like even within the DC area, I know a lot of times when I'm around a lot of white males, they'll say things like, oh, you've only got this position because of your identity. You actually don't know. So I think that's where it's something that I also agree with you with. So I'm also learning to actually say like, no, I got this job because of X, Y, and Z. But it's also picking and choosing your battles because you don't have to explain yourself to everyone too. So also just learn to kind of let it roll off your back. But I agree with what you're saying.
You're exactly right, Vannary. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone. You have to explain yourself to anyone. 1000%.
I just want to add to this point. I mean, I think the thing I would say is, you know, this is something that eventually you just kind of get used to. I think when you first are starting to do it, it's very unnerving. But you know, as you continue to find yourself as one of a few or two or three of a few, it stops bothering you after a while. And what's really good is that you are able to focus on the things you need to be focusing and not necessarily worrying so much about how someone's going to take your hair or what you're saying. It kind of comes with time and comes with like everything else when you're in it a lot. One thing I always try to encourage people to think about, particularly women of color, is, you know, we all have that imposter syndrome, and that's just something that exists because of just culture, what culture has told us throughout our lives, either, you know, either directly or indirectly, you know, things that we, even if somebody's not saying it, you see it around, you see it on TV, you see it everywhere in the books and everything, magazines, you know, all of these impressions that you're not supposed to be as good enough, or different is wrong and different is bad. But there comes a point when you kind of get tired of that and you get tired of carrying that, because in a sense, what you're doing is you're carrying around this weight that society has put on you. And if you're not the different person, they don't have that weight. So they go into a meeting and they can concentrate on doing what they got to do. Meanwhile, the different people are sitting there thinking about all this other stuff's going through your head. You know, is my hair right? Are they, like you say, are they thinking I'm here because I got privilege in some way that I'm not as good as everyone else, or you know, and so you're going through all this stuff. Meanwhile, they're just kind of sitting there doing their job. And it comes to a point where you're like, and it's like, why am I carrying all of this on my shoulder? And this is not something that I should have to carry. In fact, it's something that others put there, that is only there because others put there, not because I put it there, but because others have put it there. And when you start to think about it that way and you start to understand where it's coming from, so this is what and I might have, I mean, some of you might have heard me say this already, but it's really about understanding where the burden really belongs. It really belongs with the people who have the problems. And the burden should really be with the people who have the perceptions that are not really something that you should have to worry about. And then you can go into meetings and you can be like the one that's, I'm not carrying all this stuff for me. I come here to do a job. I came here to do an argument. I came here to present, whatever the case may be while you're there. And you can focus on getting the job done, because all the time that you're worrying about all this other stuff is brain power that you're not using to do what you came there to do. So sometimes, even if it's just me, even if it means, going into the mirror and just before you walk in that meeting, reminding yourself of how great you are and reminding yourself that you're there because you deserve to be there and nobody gave you anything. And if anything, as women of color, you had to work twice as hard as anyone else. So you probably deserve to be there more than they do. And after a while, you just kind of like, after doing it, you just need to hear yourself say that. And you push out the stuff that culture has told you all these years, and you stop putting in your own. You hear yourself, and you're not hearing everyone else and telling you you're not as good. So it's just a practice thing. You just have to keep doing, and you really will get to a point where you will walk in that room and it won't bother you, because you will know you deserve to be there. So just something to think about.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ambassador Jenkins. I full-heartedly agree with everything that you said. I think something that I've thought about is that I cannot carry more than what I already have been carrying with me throughout all these years I've been alive. I can't carry other people's shit, quite honestly. And something that I heard from an activist semi-recently, she said that she just thinks about the people that she wants to walk with. If I have to become someone that I'm not in order to walk with the people that I want to walk with, I don't want to walk with those people. So if I know the type of people that I want to walk with, then I have a better idea of where I want to go and the kind of person I want to be. And I think having a firm grasp on your values can really help inform you to how you want to be in this assumingly one life that we have. And I don't want to spend living it, for other people. They can do that themselves. But yeah, oh my gosh, thank you so much, Ambassador Jenkins. I didn't want to leave this on such a heavy question. So kind of a twist on this question is, where do you all feel safe? And that's where I want to end today's discussion. And I can go first, I guess. I feel safe around my very close loved ones, my very close friends, the people that I have in my life right now. I feel really safe with them. I feel safe with WCAPS people. I feel like this community is somewhere I feel really safe, and I'm always excited to show up in WCAPS spaces because all the people here have always been so wonderful to me, and I never feel like I have to be someone that I'm not. I don't have to put on this front. I'm not even academic or scholarly. And I had this conversation with Gabby recently. I am not by any means I don't have an educational background in international development or literally anything that WCAPS does, but I don't have to act like I am in order to be here. And I'm so grateful for that. Yeah, did anyone else want to share where they're safe?
I just wanted to say that I agree with the comment about WCAPS and feeling safe in this community that Ambassador Jenkins has really created, and the members have continued to expand and carry out. Yeah, I guess I also feel safe, in the usual places with my family and amongst friends that we have shared experiences together, and those sorts of things. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
And just to add to that a little bit too, I think, you know, of course, in the setting and friends and family, I think generally anywhere you know that a person has the same values as you do, which, you know, I think for certain things, in certain cases, you know, with political climates in the United States, like I've kind of known where I almost kind of made like this automatic assumption of like, oh, this is where I'm going to be safe versus not, based on like my perspective or like my prioritization of the human rights or anything. So I think as long as there's similar values, I feel like that creates like an automatic sense of you can disclose who you are and you can be safe in being yourself in that setting. So.
Thank you for sharing, Miriam and Gabby. Did anyone else want to share before we close out?
I know Sarah's not speaking. I know you're there. I know, Sarah, you put something in the chat. Did you want to announce it? And yes, I'm putting you on the spot. But only if you want to be in the spot.
Hi everyone. Yeah, thanks, Bonnie. No, I didn't want to intervene, but no, thanks. Yeah, indeed. Just like as I said, next Sunday we have decided with the team of the RAP to have to hold a kind of conversation between us and open up also to the other members of WCAPS on mental health, because it's the a mental health awareness month, and also because we are all going through a lot recently and in our lives in general. So like having a space where we can just discuss, there is no real main topic or objective, or if you want to come rant about your situation, come. If you want to share some tips, solutions, or ways on how you get to feel like you're feeling better when things are getting difficult, that would be great to hear from you. And if you just want to be around and just listen, that would be also really great. So yeah, it's really to share, to connect, and to have this kind of safe space, closed door discussion. Will probably be at 7 or 8 p.m. CET, so 1 or 2 p.m. New York time. But an email will be shared next week. But yeah, would love to see you there. And sorry, I can't put my camera, and I didn't want to speak during the discussion, but it was really interesting to hear from you, and I can relate to so many things you shared. And I think that some of the issues that have been shared today from the Asian community perspective is so relatable to other communities of color. I definitely recognize myself in so many things that you have said. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for organizing.
Thank you, Sarah. Amber, did you want to share about the movie screening that's coming up?
I just spammed the entire chat. Sorry, guys. Just for anyone who might be interested in a little bit more for API Heritage Month, the Asia and Pacific Working Group is hosting a movie screening and a discussion about Kumu Hina, which follows, Kumu meaning teacher, which follows a teacher named Hina, who's a Native Hawaiian, who is also third gender, but also living as a transgender person in modern society. And that's this Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, I think. And we'll have discussion afterwards led by one of our members who is also Native Hawaiian.
Awesome. Thank you, Amber. Thank you again to Vannary and Miriam for agreeing to speak on today's discussion. Thank you so much to Amber to helping make this event happen. Thank you, Pratima. I see you here, one of my co-chairs. Thank you, Ambassador Jenkins, and our new ED, Shalonda, and all of you for being here today. I really appreciate all of you engaging in our discussion, and I hope you felt a little bit of a sense of community here and safety. But with all of that said, I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day, night, etc. And we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Everyone, thank you.